Welcome, everybody, to the second meeting of the Citizens Budget Review Task Force. I'm Ron Saunders, the Alameda Village Manager, and I appointed the 5 members of the committee. 4 of them are here tonight, who I'll introduce. The 5th, Joseph Giovanetti, is out of town and cannot attend, and so I'll introduce him in just a second. But I was asked the question about whether our village council is going to pay attention to whatever this task force does. So I want to point out that in the audience right now, we have our Vice Mayor, Don Horton. We have Councilmember Deb Gillis and Councilmember Anna Richards. Councilmember Steve Friedman is watching by Zoom. He confirmed he's on Zoom. Mayor Mahoney's over at Village Hall right now at a Nearshore Water Committee meeting, and she'll be here after that meeting finishes. So all 5 Village Council members are watching or participating in this meeting. So they are listening to this task force and also to citizens who are allowed to speak. If you want to speak later on, you can sign up. But there's a sign-up sheet over here. And I have 3 people tonight that I've asked to specifically come here and address questions. We have our legal counsel, John Quick, from Weiss Serota. We have our fire chief, Terry Abel, and we have our HR chief, Jamie Terry. Chief. Yeah, I promoted you to chief. And there were some, the reason I did that is because there were some, at our last meeting, as you recall, I'd asked them not to speak to each other or to meet. Last meeting was the first time they'd actually heard from each other, but now that they've heard from each other, I didn't see any reason not to have another committee meeting or task force meeting. And so tonight, they've been giving us questions. We're going to try to answer some of those questions. We realize that most of the questions will not be answered. We're still in the process of putting together the preliminary budget, and we should have it by the end of the week. We've met with all the department heads and gotten their budget request, but we have not started the process of making cost reductions, let's just call it. And so we're going to be looking at some things, but we're not ready to do that at this point. The other thing I was asked is about the DOGE report from the state of Florida. We did receive it. We have finalized it. We're going to get the response out tomorrow. We're just double checking a few things. And so we're going to be meeting the state's requirement to give them that information they've requested. So for tonight's purposes, I'll kick it off with the task force, let them make any comments they want to have. And then, as I said, we have 3 people here. I would recommend we do the legal counsel first, and I can add my comments because we've already had some discussions. But let me kick it off and leave it to the council to introduce themselves, maybe give you a 10 or 15-second introduction.
Elizabeth Jolin, glad to be here. Thanks.
Larry Dalton, happy to assist in this endeavor.
Joe Roth. I guess I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Ron.
Stephanie Scuderi. I don't know why I always say yes.
And what I thought I would do, since we have some people here that are waiting, I'd like to kick it off with John Quick and let him come up and answer any questions. I will say that John and I've already had discussions about how we can get a better handle on our legal fees for the village. I've been asked about maybe bringing it back in-house to have a general counsel, and I've said I don't like that idea because I have been an in-house general counsel. I was general counsel for the Monroe County Clerk's Office. I was also the chief deputy attorney for Monroe County back in my younger days. And so I've seen in-house counsel. The problem I see is that the village has so many unique needs for legal counsel, labor law, environmental law, et cetera, that one person, no matter how talented, it's going to be very difficult for that one person to handle it all. So I like the fact that Weiss Serota has a very deep team of people with qualifications in very specific areas. And I'll also say I've looked at their contract, and the fee they've quoted, and we're currently abiding by, is $250 an hour. And I will say to you, that is very, very economical compared to the legal fees, not just in the Keys, but anywhere. So I'm happy with the contract. Obviously, the final decision is up to the village council. But so far, that John Quick and I have agreed that we want to keep looking for cost savings. To give you one example, in our village code, there is a provision that we can recover legal fees from people who are coming in for planning purposes, for example. We stopped doing it when we went in-house counsel and never reinstituted it. We're not sure of the dollar savings, but obviously we're looking at saving some money there. We're also trying to control who can access Weiss Serota, because right now people in the community have been calling them. Sometimes staff calls directly, and I've asked people to start going to the manager so I can kind of regulate those expenses. And so we're definitely working at reducing that budget cost. But I wanted John to come, and I was going to do it by Zoom, but he wanted to show up in person, so thank you, John, for coming, to answer any direct questions you may have about our legal fees and costs. So with that, I'll introduce John Quick, who is our interim village legal counsel.
appreciate it. If you guys don't mind, I'm gonna turn this a little bit so that, because since you guys are gonna be asking me the questions, it feels a little weird to have mostly my back to you all, so. Again, John Quick, I think I've met most of you all, so it's good to see everybody. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about the legal fees. I will say the only thing is, obviously, there are some attorney-client privilege issues that could come up if there are specific questions about individual matters or time entries or things like that. But obviously, I'll do the best that I can to answer any specific questions. I did come, I'm aware, I saw some of Ms. Jolin and Ms. Scuderi. I saw your I guess what you had submitted in terms of looking at the legal fees, in terms of, I think you both proposed moving potentially to in-house. So I did take a look at what you all were spending on in-house attorneys before I joined, because, and not just the in-house attorney, but the total legal budget, because I think sometimes when people look at when you talk about an in-house attorney, you just look at the salary. And there's a salary of X number, but the reality is that's not the legal budget, as Ron spoke about a little bit. And actually, towards the end of the tenure with the last in-house attorney, your legal budget, the actual legal budget, was in excess of $600,000 for 2 of the 3 years. So I took a look at that. Our actual budget or our estimated budget for this year is coming out at 684.23. I know the budget says 750. Obviously, that's a budgeted number because, like I tell everybody, legal, we do as much or as little work as is necessary. So we put in a budget in order to, obviously, we need to have a budget so that we can plan for the year. But we don't know what type of litigation might arise. We don't know what types of issues might arise. So some issues, some years it might be a little more, some years it might be less. Obviously, my goal is always to be less. And honestly, my goal is to try to be, it's kind of an unattainable goal for legal because we don't really generate revenue, but I always try to be revenue neutral. I think if you all remember from the budget year last year, we even went out and prosecuted some old code fines and were able to recover close to $70,000, and we did not spend anywhere near that. But obviously, if we were spending more than that, it doesn't really make sense to do that. But that's kind of one of our goals is to try to limit the amount of money that you all have to spend, because unfortunately, legal, especially in the Keys, we have extra layers of oversight, especially in the planning department when we've got Department of Commerce looking at us. Now we've got the Florida Doge, who's not just looking at us, but looking at everybody. So legal is kind of that necessary evil, and I'm always trying to look for ways to limit the amounts that you all spend. And to that end, Ron and I spoke after your last meeting, and to Ron's credit, one of the things we talked about was what he intimated at was this, what's called cost recovery. For whatever reason, before Ron joined, the village was not really interested in it, but it's built into your code, which is when you've got a planning application that comes in and it requires legal to review it. Right now, if you don't go through this cost recovery mechanism, it's coming out of general fund. But in your code, it allows you to bill that to your developers and your applicants. So if somebody's coming in with a major development application and it requires legal to review it, we can do what's called a cost recovery method, where that amount shifts over to the developer and it's part of their development costs, and it shifts away from your general fund and shifts away from the general taxpayers. So Ron is planning to institute that, and I'm happy to do that, because it's a cost savings, and honestly is kind of low-hanging fruit because it's there. But the predecessors, this was not something, it was not something that was instituted for whatever reason. So we think that there's going to be a fairly significant cost savings there. Like I said, to go back, looking at the prior, your predecessors, or my predecessor with the in-house counsel, I took like the 2019, 2020 year, I looked at that. That was the amount that was paid in the legal bill was $603,503 plus the village had a separate contract with your in-house attorney to like monitor state legislative things for $30,000. So $633,503. So you know what? Considering that we're 6 years down the line, that's pretty close to where we are right now with an estimate with a projected of 684. But I also took a look. I said, let me look at what the South Florida CPI is, just to see, because we haven't gotten a raise in the entire time we've been here. We're at 250, and I got to be honest with you guys, my firm is killing me because that is, if it's not the lowest rate in the firm, it's one of the lowest rates. But we haven't gotten a raise since before we joined. We were billing at 250 when we were doing outside labor work. When we were brought in, when Roger left, we said, yes, we'll honor that rate. But it's been 5 years now and we've never gotten a raise. So I said, well, let me look kind of at the CPI. What's the South Florida CPI? And I just did a rough calculation. And if you did the CPI of that 633,503, it would actually put you at 837,155. So listen, your in-house counsel, he would be getting a raise. I mean, those COLA raises that come in, it would be built into his or her contract, and it was built into his contract before that he got those raises. So I was pleasantly surprised to see, how much lower we actually are. I mean, that's about 150,000 less. If, factoring again, it's a rough calculation of CPI. It's not perfect, but it just it shows you that I think that we do bring significant value at what I think is actually a lower rate than you all probably would end up paying. I also mentioned there's a number of I mentioned litigation before. You really can't plan for litigation. I mean, unless you're planning to bring it, which we have, other than that one code enforcement prosecution matter I mentioned, we have not done. So there's been some significant litigation expenses recently. There was some litigation related to the Avocado Street. That was, thankfully, at some point, the plaintiff there amended it and it brought it under insurance defense, so we were able to the village didn't have to pay for it. But up until that point, it was about $120,000 for that one lawsuit. And it would have been significantly more had we not been able to get it covered by insurance. But there's some other lawsuits out there that the council's aware of, and I circulate a quarterly litigation update. Actually, I just sent one yesterday, was the most recent one, because we're coming up on the end of July. There were probably six to eight litigation matters in there, some of which are covered by insurance, some of which are not. So I'm hopeful that we're going to have less litigation this year. Again, it just depends on council, the determinations. We had a recent one. There was a land use decision that was appealed. There was somebody who was seeking a vacation rental license, and it was denied, and I think rightfully so by staff, and it was denied rightfully so by the council. But they're appealing it. So we have to defend that, and that's something that's built into our budget, because regardless of whether you have in-house counsel or whether you have us, somebody's going to need to do that, and honestly, it won't be your in-house counsel. Litigation takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's really difficult to do in-house. I worked in-house at one of the major cruise lines years ago, and I understood just how difficult it is to do litigation in-house. And that was one of the reasons actually why I left, because just as the cases started getting interesting, you had to send them out. So I left, and I haven't looked back, at least. But I just mentioned that because that's the reality. Those are expenses that you would have to incur. And I know what the going rate is for outside counsel, and it's not $250 an hour. Like if we were to be hired for outside counsel, it would not be anywhere near $250 an hour. So that's kind of my spiel in terms of what I understood the questions to be. But if there's any specific questions or you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to respond or happy to answer to those.
Yeah, thank you, John. And what I think is pretty great about the conversation is that that just with a simple, like sort of having this initial conversation, it brought some nice ideas to the table about how to prepare some cost savings to the taxpayers. And I think that's amazing. You know, I love your suggestion. Perhaps there are more. And so I appreciate your willingness to think in broad terms, to just address overall how we can think sort of alternatively about our budget.
Yeah, when I was working with the college, we were constantly looking for legal, and there's a cap for that kind of an entity, and nobody wanted to do it because it was not worth it, right? So appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. A couple of questions. What is the going rate for your firm for outside counsel?
So the minimum for government rate,
Government rate.
minimum government rate for outside counsel is $325, either $325 or $350. It's one, either $325 or $350. Unfortunately, as you can tell, that's why I'm saying I'm getting killed by my firm.
Well, and hence my next question. And the $250 an hour rate, is that the same fee when you go to one of your colleagues in-house? Are we paying that same amount, not just for you, but for your specialty attorneys?
Yeah, it's $250 for everyone. So when you get, so I have a partner, Ed Geddes. He was on the short list for the Supreme Court, was sent up to the governor years ago. Selfishly, I'm glad he didn't get it because I get to keep working with him, but he also would have been great for the state up there. That's what he does. He does appellate work at the Supreme Court level. He's worked on your cases, and you get him for $250 an hour, and that is a bargain.
And quite frankly, $250 is a really good rate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. Now, you talked about instituting a policy to shift legal costs to developers for the work that is required. Can that be retroactive?
It's in the code. I would say if the development's already been approved and if the development's already been approved and their cost recovery deposit's been refunded, unlikely. But if there's ones in the queue now, then I don't see why we couldn't. I mean, we can move this. It's in the code, so it's not like I said we're instituting it, but it's really reviving it, honestly. So everybody's on notice that this is out there. So if they're in the queue, I think that it's something that we can talk about. In fact, I was meeting with the department earlier today, and there's a potential one. If it comes in, it will be subject to cost recovery with our fees too.
Okay. And not holding you to any numbers on this, but how much do you think that would generate per year?
In terms of savings to the village, my guess, and again, this is just a guess because
Absolutely not holding you
we
to
haven't
it.
done it. My guess is it probably would be somewhere on the low end. I would think 25. On the high end, maybe 50 to 60,000.
Okay.
That's just if once we get a year of it under our belt, I'll have a better feel for it. But if there's less development applications, that means there's probably less legal work that we're doing.
Right.
So but if there's more, then it's going to be shifted. And so yeah, that's my guess, my best guess, because I did look at that to try to figure that out because I anticipated that might be a question.
Okay. And what are your recommendations to decrease the legal use? I mean, if you have citizens calling you and employees calling you, that's $250 every time you pick up the phone, give or take.
Yeah, I've
Okay?
always told people if it's a question I can answer quickly, it's not showing up on my bills. I'm like, if you call, if somebody calls me and says, does our code allow this, and I know it, I'm not nickel and diming you. I want to be the village attorney until I retire, and making $50 on a phone call is not going to get me there. Right. But, sorry, did I cut you off? I didn't.
No.
Okay. I was going to say, but that's something that Ron and I talked about Ron talked about having things more come through him so that he can funnel it. And I think that will help because, there might be some things that Ron sees and says, listen, we don't need legal to jump in on this. There's also some other things we've done where we have created, I don't like using the term form, but kind of like basically, I'll use it, but like form contracts. And so I've told, the village, listen, if you follow this contract, we don't need to review it because we've already reviewed everything in there. That work's been done. So there are contracts out there that we don't even need to be involved in. And so I think that those are ways that now that we've been able to update those, that they're going to start, you'll see some savings with those as well.
Okay.
And then also, if they do have changes, we would only have to review, just the changes or just, they want to add this provision in there, things like that. Ron's also talked about having, doing some of the drafting of the resolutions more in-house than us. I think that obviously will help. I mean, if we have to sit, there's some resolutions obviously that are complex that we'll have to deal with, like there might be state preemptions and things like that, but there's other ones that are fairly straightforward and we've already drafted them and I've got samples that can send out and then I would just be reviewing them as opposed to drafting. I think those are ways that, they're small increments, but they add up over the year in terms of that. And yeah, just, obviously the less we're used, then the less, our bill, the lower our bills are going to be.
Very good. Thank you.
I think, Larry, you hit one of mine was the cost, depending on the discipline with regards to, what case comes before you. Are you using a specialist? Does that cost change? I think that's important too. The other thing that crept into my mind as you were talking was about the insurance and money paid via insurance on some of these settlements or some of the defense costs. Does that add to the overall cost of what the legal fees are in the village? Is that built into those numbers you were talking about earlier? Is that how does that work? Is that something that is in addition to, or does it reduce, or give me an idea there?
So the answer is sometimes. I think so. I know that there was a recent settlement with a former employee, and that has been built into that was built into the legal budget, and that's in there. This was the prior year, and so that's built into there. So even though it was not that was a payment by the village, though, not by the insurance company. So even though that really wasn't a legal expense, it was allocated for audit purposes to legal. So we're not seeing, that was like $80,000. We didn't see any of that. That went out and paid to the plaintiff in that case and his attorneys. The insurance, if it comes from the insurance company, no, because that really wouldn't be shown on our balance sheet. The only thing that might reflect is if there's a change in the premium, year after year, but that there wouldn't be a direct correlation with that in terms of the litigation or any payouts for that.
Could you explain how the insurance works?
I can try. So we have we're insured through a company called PRM, which is a municipal managed and owned provider. So each of the municipalities pay in, and it's a group. It's not like your traditional, you go with Liberty Mutual, or not that they would do that, but you go with your traditional insurance company. So everybody pays in. We have you pay in through a premium. What ends up happening then, we get a case. We obviously have an insurance contract that says what it covers, what it doesn't cover. So whenever we get a lawsuit in, first thing we do, send it over to the insurance company to see if there's coverage. If there's coverage, great. Basically at that point, all I'm doing is making sure that the insurance defense counsel is, moving the case along as the village would like to see. And if there's not, then it gets kicked back. They advise that there's not coverage. If the village thinks that we haven't had this to this point, but if the village thinks that there's a they were wrong, you can challenge that denial. If not, then obviously we have to defend the case, so our office would take it over and defend the case. In terms of when there's an insurance defense counsel that's assigned, we don't have any say as to who gets assigned to that. They have a group of people that they assign. They do have one of the partners in my firm is part of that group, and he's handled some of them. But there's also, we've had attorneys from the West Coast. We've had attorneys from Orlando. So they make the decision based upon who their approved defense counsel is, and then we work with them, and we're happy to do so, and we're happy to do it on somebody else's dime.
How much money do we pay for that coverage?
I don't know. I'd have to check with the finance department. I'm not sure what our premiums are.
So I understand it correctly that you manage the insurance?
The insurance?
Yeah.
No, I don't deal with that
Not yet.
is
Okay.
staff handles that. I work with the insurance defense counsel once they get appointed. And when I say work with them, they really handle the case, but obviously I have institutional knowledge. So, making sure that they understand, especially if we have attorneys from other parts of the state, because things are different here in the Keys. And
I'm gonna let you off the hook here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm curious. There were, over 2 years there was a 58% increase for PRM, and I don't think that you're.
I wouldn't be the right person to answer that.
Shaking you off the hook.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think you're the person to answer the
Yeah,
question.
no, I don't know anything about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
You're welcome. Yeah.
Joe.
Well, thank you, everybody, and and I also want to thank you all for your service. I know it can be a thankless job, so everybody appreciates it, and thank you very much for everything you guys are doing and volunteering your time for everything. So,
Well, at $250 an hour, thank you.
you're welcome.
One question before you leave. Where do you live?
I live in South Dade, so I'm in Palmetto Bay. So it actually takes me less time to get here than it takes me to get to our Miami office. So.
Do we pay for your travel?
No, I do not charge for my travel. The only thing, if I'm on a substantive phone call for the drive, then yes. But no, you don't. I mean, that's just part of my commute. That's yeah. I wish I could afford to live down here.
In fact, as I said, I'd asked John to appear by Zoom to save that, and he said no, he'd come in person and not charge us. So once again, thank you, John. And I'll say publicly, I'm very happy with the services of Weiss Serota. And as I said, I'm still a practicing attorney. I'm a member of the Florida Bar. And so he and I work together pretty well, and I can sometimes pre-review things and say we don't even need to get Weiss Serota involved. As he said, some simple resolutions, et cetera, we can handle it in-house. And so we're trying to find ways we can save money. And fortunately, starting off with legal fees was a good place to start, I think. Any members of the public want to comment on legal fees? Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about our staffing. We have our Human Resources Director, Jamie Terry, here. She's coming up. One question I've been asked is, what about the big increase in staff, because they've seen the budget increase? And so I asked Jamie today, and she could talk about it. The last fiscal year, 24-25, we increased by 2 full-time positions, one in fire and one at the marina. So 2 increased positions. 23-24, we increased 2.5 positions. Legal -2, I think that's when the in-house counsel left. And then we increased parks by 1.5 and HR by 1. The year before that it was a little bigger. We had 5 fire, for example. So what I'm saying is the actual number of staff really hasn't increased. But what you're seeing in the budget, what you're going to hear now, which is why I asked Jamie to come, is the benefits. And obviously, several of you have mentioned that to me. And we are locked into some. And we also have the fire chief here, Terry Abel, and he's going to talk about that's a significant part of the budget. And also, obviously, with the staffing, a significant part of those costs are fire rescue, and so he'll be talking about that in more detail. But I wanted Jamie to kind of talk to you just overall about specifically the benefits issue that Dr. Dalton brought up, but also where we are staff-wise. So I've also been asked, where do we compare to Marathon? Where do we compare with the county? And I think she's done a lot of work as far as getting those details. And I think it's important for the public to hear it too, because we hear that, and the council hears that when they're out, is, why are you overstaffed? Why do you have so many people? And in the whole scheme of things, what I'm seeing is that I think we have a good staff. I'm in support of our staff. I think that we are trying to keep our staff. And the two things we're looking at are salaries and benefits, and they kind of balance each other. The higher the salary, the lower the benefit, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is be competitive. In other words, to keep or attract somebody, it's a combination of two things. You can't just look at the salaries, you also have to look at the benefits and look at that as a package. And as Dr. Dalton has mentioned, sometimes that cost can be, just the benefits be maybe 40% on top of the salary. It depends on the health plan you have, et cetera. So I wanted Jamie to talk about some of the details, answer questions, because obviously the biggest part of our budget is personnel, and so obviously that's where we want to start. So with that, Jamie Terry is our Director of Human Resources.
Hello. I handed you a sheet of paper just kind of giving you a staffing, the number of budgeted positions since 18-19 fiscal year through the proposed 25-26, which we haven't put out yet, but none of the departments have asked for additional staff, just in the new proposed budget, just so you're aware of that. I did outline what the differences were between the years and which departments. So if you have any, specific questions of those, I'll try to answer. I do want to say that the fire, we did have a SAFER grant. And so the fire increase was related to a SAFER grant. That grant went away last year. We finished the last of the payments from reimbursements from the SAFER grant. So those positions did roll into our budget as full-time positions that we're paying for. And there were 6 positions there for that. I don't know if you have specific questions about the staffing I know benefits is a big time thing.
I believe at one point, as I was doing my research, I thought we were down to 116 full-time employees.
Well,
Where are we now?
Yeah, there's a difference between budgeted and actual.
What do we have actual?
Actual, we have 115 employees
115.
currently. And that includes part-time. So that's a combination of part-time
So
and...
how many full-time do we have? Because
we have
full-time we have to pay benefits.
Yes, you are correct. So we have 7 active part-time employees, and those are all and we had budgeted for 13, and those are all in the Parks and Rec department. And then we have seasonal employees. So Parks and Rec fluctuates, but they don't get benefits. So there's that. The only ones that get, the part-time employees get FRS, but they don't get health insurance and all the other stuff. Holidays, vacation, sick time, they don't get any of that.
What is FRS?
FRS is Florida Retirement System. That's our retirement system.
So part-time employees get that?
Yes. Designated part-time employees, which means they work a full year, but part-time hours. Then we have seasonal employees that work like a month here, a month there. The kids from the school mostly.
Does FRS mandate that part-time employees get that benefit?
Yes, there is in the FRS, there is a requirement for part-time employees, and you have to meet some eligibility requirements, and then they participate by contributing the 3%, just like full-time employees.
So in the general fund, I'm looking at the paperwork, right? This would be under the village manager tab?
I don't
Any-
know. I didn't bring any of that up here with me, but go ahead, shoot. I'll try to answer.
Let me answer. I think that under the way the budget is set up, human resources comes under the village manager's budget.
Okay.
Also, environmental, Peter Frezza is under it. So there's several things that are not directly village manager, but for budget purposes, it's underneath my budget as opposed to planning or other things. So specifically, my budget looks bigger than it probably is because they've put some things in the past underneath, for example, human resources.
Yeah, we don't have an HR account per se, so we fall under village manager.
All right, and just to call it out, not to be gotcha or anything, but you guys asked me to be on this task force for a reason, right? In 2 years, the village manager budget rose 24%. And just regular salaries and wages rose 19%. And so looking at what we're looking for in the next year, what does that look like? And, I mean, I could ask why, but I don't think that we have time tonight to go through all of the whys. But, I mean, just to say like, okay, so it increased in 2 years, 24%. How much more is it going to increase and why? There's a chart.
So I've been here almost 5 years, and Maria was filling in as the village manager when I got here, and I think she was making 145,000, maybe. And then Greg came and he made 168, I think. And then Ted came and he made 200,000, and now Ron is here making 200,000. So the only additional employees in village manager is the addition of my HR assistant for 60,000.
Okay. All right, Ron, it's all on you.
And also, I want to add, also, Mr. Cole, my predecessor, also made 200,000. So the contract
Oh,
hasn't
sorry,
changed.
I missed Rob. I'm sorry. It's not on purpose. Sorry.
Well, I mean, and it's not just about the village manager. Like, it's not a target for that at all. It's just looking at the overall number. I know when one of the, not the past, but the second to past village manager came in and did some changes for the employees' insurance, and that apparently was just a really big win. Everybody loved what he did for employee insurance. And now I kind of look at it and I'm like, oh, we're going from X to Y, right? So I just want to point that out.
Okay. Any other question on staffing before we move to the health insurance? Because it's a good point.
How can you cut 10% of your staff? Not the staff overall, but if we're looking at trying to reduce, overall costs, I think a 10% reduction in overall staff would be reasonable. Any ideas where that would come from?
10% in the number of employees,
Yes.
or 10% in the overall? We have some vacancies right now. Could start with the vacancies. Other than that, you would have to lay off in certain areas. If you're just talking number of staff.
Well, that's one way to look at it, number of staff.
And can I make a comment? Well, just to interrupt a little bit. I think this conversation is, I wonder if it would be helpful for us to pause for a second to think about how this group can be most helpful to moving forward, or if this group has ideas about what we'd like to see overall, because I think, I can't imagine that you can respond to how can we reduce 10%, but I think there might be some agreement in how can we reduce this budget? Is there a way to look more closely at these areas and come back with recommendations? I mean, I don't know what happens in these departments. It absolutely would not be something I could weigh in on as far as how to reduce. But I think that what you're alluding to, Larry, is interesting in saying, can we think about some goal in the future for a reduction, some percentage to meet, some deliverables that, hey, Ron, can we look at reducing by this amount in this amount of time? I think that might be a way to think about how to have this conversation.
Well, I totally would agree with you, Elizabeth. I mean, I'm looking at just insurance under finance and administration, and Joe, you might have something to say about this. Between actual 22 and 23 to budgeted 24-25, insurance went up 58%.
I mean, it's a
And
lot.
I know insurance goes up. I know it's like everybody's talking about insurance and it's all over the state, but 58%? Like, okay, maybe we could.
Are you looking at employee insurance premiums?
It's under finance and administration and
Under personnel, or are you looking in operating?
PRM. GL is probably operating,
Yeah, so,
but there could be, there may be some way for somebody to pull that down.
I'm not in finance, but I will say that our brokers are looking for ways all the time to get us a better deal on our insurance, and
Hopefully. But 58% in 2 years is like almost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
that's liability, that's pollution insurance, that's
Whatever it is,
yeah,
I'm
I
just,
mean, it's-
and
yeah, I'm not.
I'm
yeah.
not, you do
I
not
can't
need
answer
to
that one.
defend this, like, yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah, I
I'm
can
just
answer the
saying,
personnel one.
But
though,
if we
you
are
wanna
looking
look
at like the
that
big
number.
shifts in 2 years, and, I'm looking at this from the perspective that we've had so much turnover at a leadership level. What has been happening, right, at the lower level, and where has the budget been building, and why? And it could be perfectly fine, I'm not coming in here with a bunch of darts. Check my darts at the door. It's just a matter that there are certain things that are like, whoa, these are really big swings. And that's one of them. And you know what, if it was property, it would be one thing, but these are like you said, it's like operating.
I think
But
that's
there's
just
somebody,
where.
there's
yeah,
somebody on this panel that.
Well,
may
and let me
know more about
clarify,
these.
Jamie's here for the human resources part.
Yeah.
These are
Personnel
valid
only,
questions, but I
please.
think that's a bigger picture kind of thing, like public risk management. As John was talking about, some of the things are like insurance for covering lawsuits. And if you get sued a lot, or you have employees that are suing the village, those are expensive things, and you end up paying one way or another. We've been fortunate to be able to assign a lot of the costs, for example, to our insurance, but that also means the premiums are probably going to go up. But we are looking at all the things you've mentioned. They're all on the table as far as looking at. I think the question going back to Dr. Dalton is, we have some departments that have 2 people. Human Resources has she and Lindsay. We have our clerk has the clerk and deputy clerk. That's a department with 2 people. Now, you have big departments. You have Parks and Recreation. You have Public Works. They have a lot of employees. But then the question becomes, you want to cut 10% of the workers out that are cleaning up? That's a decision the council would make. But I'm saying a lot of people go, no, we really don't want to do that. So I think rather than looking at people, staffing, I think we're looking at cost. And that's where I wanted to get into the benefits discussion, because a big part of the increase in our costs has not been we're hiring more people. It's because we're incurring more cost. Because as you give nice benefits to help keep people here, those costs are going up, as everybody's is.
And, yeah.
Ron, I'm looking at the sheet of paper that they gave me, and I'm looking at a 20% increase in manpower over 5 years. Okay? So I'm just looking at the chart. Over 5 years, the population has not increased. We haven't gotten any bigger.
Right.
And so that's why I ask, okay, we've got 20% more people working for the city. I'm looking for a 10% reduction. I think it's reasonable to consider. I'm not saying
Yeah.
fire anybody right now, but it needs to be on the table. We need to have that conversation.
And can I ask you, Larry, and I would assume that your request is with an end goal of saying, we don't want to pay more taxes. So this conversation, that is one solution to say, we're broadcasting to our council, like, no, we don't want to pay more taxes. And so then what other elements line up so that we can keep our taxes in line? So for example, and that gets down into other conversations that we might have tonight, where else is there room for more income? Maybe it's the marina. We have enterprise funds. We look at the wastewater. I mean, that is apparently running at a deficit. That is an area where we might improve our income stream. And I mean, that is really not my job to do that, or I don't have that expertise, but you do, manager. So I wonder if end goal here are the highlights that look like there's a problem, and then can you fix that so that we don't have to raise our taxes? Because I think that's ultimately where we're going here. And if you say, we've done the department, we've done the culling and the scrutinizing, and maybe we keep all our employees, but we find more income through our enterprise funds or wherever else that may be, or we think about how we can trim in other areas,
Let me explain a little bit about the budget process so far. As everybody knows, our finance director resigned about a month or two ago without much notice and moved out of town. And we only have 2 staff people right now, Hattie and Callie, that are actually our budget people. So we have 2 people working on the budget, and it's been challenging. We're getting close now to having what I would call a continuation budget, meaning here's what you got last year, here's what you need this year. We've obviously it's not seen a big increase in staffing, but in the end, we're going to go almost to zero base budgeting. Once I start meeting with the individual department heads and once I know what our deficit is, we are going to have a deficit. Our revenues are going to be less than our expenses in the proposed budget. We know that already. Then we're going to start getting the one-on-one discussions of, as Dr. Dalton is saying, where can we find some savings here? Because we have to. We don't want to raise property taxes. Not a single village council person said to me, I like the budget as is, let's not lower taxes. They're looking for ways to not have a $3 million budget this year. Unfortunately, you start reducing from 3, you're getting into deficit territory. We're looking at, number one, revenue sources, okay? We have the Parks and Rec people. Maria's here tonight. We're looking at maybe increasing some fees for non-residents, for example. We're looking at the marina. I've had Lisa's here, our head of that. We're looking at some of the rates that they're paying for the marina. Are they in line with the market, et cetera? Do we have a waiting list? Should we look at those fees? We're looking at increases, but it's not going to generate a lot of money. Wastewater and stormwater, we are running deficits there. The problem there is those rates are set by the council by resolution, and you just can't arbitrarily just jump them up. Some cases you have to actually go to referendum if you go over a certain amount. We have a former council person here, a lot harder than it sounds to get these things passed. We do have a slight increase, for example, in solid waste fees that most people aren't going to see, but it's I think a $30 increase over the year, but we're still in a deficit in solid waste because we have some contracts that, for example, lock in a cost of living for the contractor, but we're not locking it in for the rates. And so those are issues we're facing in the short term. So we are looking at all the things you're talking about, but once again, focusing on Jamie, a big question that keeps coming up to me is that we are paying very good benefits, and I concur they're very good benefits. I also know that we've done a salary study that said in some areas, not all, that we are under market for our salaries. Now, we're not looking at coming in for salary increases. I'm just saying you have to find that balance of paying a competitive salary with competitive benefits and find that mixture. That's where Jamie's expertise is. She and I talk literally every day about what can we do to save some costs, and it's sometimes a one-way discussion from her to me of what we can and can't do. The other thing to keep in mind is with fire rescue, and you're going to hear from the chief later, we are locked in on a significant part of our budget with benefits and salaries for fire rescue. And I believe they're they did a great job for us, but we don't have as much flexibility in certain areas. So I wanted to focus tonight specifically for Dr. Dalton's question about I think he called it our platinum benefits package. Well, here's the expert. If you have specific questions on why we're paying what we're paying and why it's cost us what it's costing us, I'd like to focus those questions on Jamie because that's her area of expertise. The other things I just wanted to address, but I really want to get to Jamie because that was a big issue, and it's a big issue in our budget. But unfortunately, some things we're locked into and some things we're not. I wanted her tonight, my new word is non-discretionary, meaning there's some things in the budget that are non-discretionary. We have no choice. But there are some discretionary things that we can make. Now, they may be hard decisions, like you start affecting employee benefits. We might be able to do it. Is it a good move? What's the impact on our staff, for example? But I wanted Jamie to kind of explain where we are with the benefits, why they are where they are, and if there's something that can be done about it. I think those are the questions I was getting from this task force is, what's the situation with that? The other things about staffing, just to point out, we had 105 employees in 2018, 2019. We're up to 125 now. At least 8 of them are fire, based on grants, et cetera. So I think we can defend our increase in number of people and staff. Budget-wise. But the costs are something that I think that's the discussion you want to have is not cutting people, but maybe looking at cutting costs.
I think we need to be able to open to, we want to have an open discussion. So again, nobody wants to look at firing people, but we got to look at a 20% increase in staff in a 5-year period without a 20% increase in services. So, okay, let's talk about benefits, my favorite.
Okay. Like Ron said, we're not going to be able to make any impacts with the collective bargaining, the folks that are in the collective bargaining, and that's 39 employees currently covered by collective bargaining.
That's the fire department.
Yes.
Okay, just so,
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
Yeah,
Just to
we only
clear.
have one union, and it is the fire union. So there's 39 employees that are in that class. There was discussion about the dependent coverage, and the dependent coverage, if you take fire out, you're talking about a class of 40 employees out of the 116, excluding fire. So the impact is 40 employees if we wanted to do something different with dependent coverage. So just keep that in mind.
So you're saying 140 employees have dependents that are also reliant?
40.
40.
Out of the 115 active employees that we have right now, 40 of them have dependent coverage excluding fire, because we can't do
Okay.
anything with fire. So we're just talking about 40 employees, 40.
And when you say dependent coverage, you mean they have children?
A spouse or
A spouse.
family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Domestic partners. We have all that. So, I don't know if I feel like I keep going in and out. Am I going in and out?
No, you're good.
All right. Historically, and so I know you had mentioned this and you asked me the question about what changed. So the 21-22 fiscal year, there was a change in our village manager, and that village manager wanted the healthcare to be out the same for everybody, including him. And that's where the change happened. And I think what they did was they didn't anticipate, what I can look at from going back, is they didn't really anticipate the amount of employees that would take advantage of that dependent coverage. So that's why the significant increase over the years is that there was only a certain number of people that were currently taking advantage of dependent coverage. Let's say 5 out of 105 employees were taking advantage of dependent coverage. The following year, out of 119 employees, 26, 36, 46, 48 employees. It jumped from 5 employees taking advantage of dependent coverage to 48 employees taking advantage of dependent coverage. And it just increases every year who's taking advantage of dependent coverage. And it is a recruiting model, not to say anything bad about it, but that's why the big increase. So if you go back, you're going to see that we're budgeting now more accurately on the number of people, the tier level of insurance that they have, because that does make a difference in what the village contributes versus what the employee contributes. And the employee does contribute to their dependent coverage. We do not pay 100% of dependent coverage.
You pay about 97%.
For one particular tier, yes, you're correct.
And the lowest is 91%.
90 point, the number, hold on.
Yeah.
So the cost is significant. For the 40 employees, what is the cost for the dependent coverage?
It is a rough figure, because I've been trying to crunch numbers out of my archaic HR system. Thank you, council, for letting me get a new one. 499.5 thousand.
So $500,000.
Oh, sorry, backing up. Gosh, that was for fire, never mind. I didn't pull that number, I'm sorry. I was trying to break fire out, I didn't pull that number.
But without that number, I think the point is that it's surprising, right? And I wonder, was there a major employee dissatisfaction prior to that change by the particular manager who, I mean, was it you had a lot, I mean, was there attrition because you didn't have excellent rates? I mean, I think it's just that that's a surprising number. It's pretty amazing. I mean, wow.
We also
So-
did go to a partially funded plan at that time too, which did help the premiums. I can't speak to employee morale in terms of all of that. I wasn't in this position, unfortunately, but
Okay, let me ask it a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, from your HR perspective, it's a pretty amazing plan, right?
It
I mean,
is,
that's like-
absolutely.
So also, didn't that trigger having to change the fire department benefits? Because the fire has to match your regular staff. Am I wrong about that? Didn't that change? And do you understand my question?
oh, I understand your question.
okay, so
I'm
wasn't there a
trying
trigger
to
there?
formulate my answer.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So we were in the year it changed,
Yeah.
they were in the middle of a contract. And so in my professional opinion, that should have been negotiated.
I think we also need to look at payroll and how payroll changed with insurance, because I spoke to a couple of people over the years when the insurance changed at the village, and they were like over the moon. It changed their life. It made things so much more affordable. I can actually there was some pride of working for the village and knowing that they were taken care of. But I think that there's another axis to that equation, which is payroll. And I don't think tonight's the night to go into that.
Yeah, we're
But,
not
I
going
mean,
to
I
make the
think that-
decision. I
that-
think we just need to acknowledge it's a lot, right?
And I don't want to take anything away from anybody, right? I mean, to live down here and have your health insurance be something that you don't really need to worry about.
Yes.
I mean, like, oh my goodness, that is a retentive measure, and if you have good employees, then that is phenomenal. Like, I really, having been on the employment end before and having people say, like, I can't even afford my insurance. So I think that this is a fluid conversation, and I think it also maybe doesn't just cut to the numbers, but cuts to the value proposition of the quality of people that we want working for the village, and who we want to keep, and how we want to keep quality people working at the village.
Yes, 100%. And it's a balance between the salary.
Absolutely.
If you pay a higher salary and a little bit less for benefits, you're
And that's where the axis comes in.
Right.
And that's probably a different conversation that I didn't even think about. But that, I don't want to take people's benefits away. That would be terrible. That would,
I mean, there's not necessarily taking their benefit away. There's ways to try to recoup some of that through an increase in the premium to the employee. But if you don't do a COLA and you increase their premium, you're taking money away from the
right, but
employee.
you increase the
so-
COLA. COLA doesn't.
Yeah. So it's
We don't need to get into that tonight.
yeah.
But there's definitely, it's not just,
In our
in my mind, it's not just insurance and let's cut the cost and how do we do that? It's a matter of, well, let's look at the benefits and the salaries and the quality of people that we have been able to retain, because I really believe it's so hard to get good benefits down here and get good people. But that also circles back to how many people do we need?
There's good benefits, there's average benefits, and there's what this city has. Okay? This benefit program pays not only for the employee, which is, I think, is fine. We pay for people that don't work for the city, which I don't, as a taxpayer, I do not think is fine.
wait, what?
As a taxpayer, we pay
Wait,
for
you just said we
dependents.
pay for
Those
oh,
dependents do not
dependents.
work
Okay.
for the city. So as a taxpayer, I don't think that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that I've talked to, and I've talked to dozens of people in this community, they don't think it's fine either. This program also pays for vision. There may be people that don't use vision, but we're still paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
It pays for dental. These people may use it, they may not. But it's mandated. There's also, if I remember correctly, almost a life insurance in there too that is paid for by the city as part of this program. And that is, I will use my term again, a gold-plated Rolls-Royce benefit program for a city that is trying to get a hold of their budget. This needs to be pared back. How would you recommend we do that?
Wow.
Can I just
I
ask
don't.
on that? 'Cause when you ask that, I mean, just to follow up, it's like once you have that program, are you just stuck with it? Can you never change it?
No, not necessarily. And like I said, it's a balancing game. So, like, I think you're talking about 40 employees right now that take advantage of dependent coverage. We can't touch fire for another 2 years. So, if you want to change everybody but fire, I think there's going to be an issue with the rest of the employees. If you don't increase with a COLA and you decrease or increase the amount that you're going to make employees pay for a premium, we're going to have a problem with employees. Right now, we cannot fill vacancies. We're not able to fill vacancies.
You're
That's
not
a bad
alone
thing.
in Monroe County. Like that is, it's not just an Island Rock
I know.
thing, right?
And we have better benefits than them. And, like, I understand them not filling their positions, but like, I mean, but we're not.
just really
we're not
expensive to live
paying-
here.
Yeah, and we're not. We made a very qualified offer to a very qualified senior planner that would have helped our planning department significantly. And he looked at the offer, he looked around, and he said, I can't do it. And we haven't had any other bites. So that's a vacancy we've had open for a very long time. So I don't know what the answer is. I do understand where you're coming from. I worked for the largest nuclear plant in Arizona for 25 years. And we had a good benefit package, but we were private. I get it. We're outside of the industry norm, understandably, on the dependent coverage. But that was a decision that was made several years ago, and we're living with it now.
So just for my clarity, the collective bargaining employees' benefits are consistent with the non-collective bargaining employees. They're the same, right?
Yes, and they were not previously.
Okay, so I read through the 28 pages of the benefit study that you guys conducted, which I requested. And it is consistent with some of the comments here tonight. I think where we stack up against our peer group, and that benefit study did look at our peers, look at close peers. I think Marathon was one. I can't remember the others, but it did indicate in most areas we are in the same percentile with our peer group across the board with other peer groups. Where it did make references were benefit rich on the dependent side.
Yeah.
And clearly there's some good points for that. I think one of the things that you said just a few minutes ago about not being able to attract a certain candidate, I don't know if dependent coverage would make a difference there, but I think what really makes a difference is the cost of living here. It's not really benefits per se. I don't think that's what's going to keep that guy from coming here or that gal from
It was
coming
mostly
here.
the
It's gonna be,
salary.
can I afford to rent or buy, or can I ever buy?
Right.
So I think when you couple that kind of conversation along with what Larry's saying, maybe quality over quantity, if there's a way to do that. One thing that we haven't talked about, and we are on human resources, and one thing that I noticed is the overtime. I think that that any overtime bears looking at, because maybe that's an opportunity for us, as funny as it sounds, is to hire somebody else instead of paying overtime to more people, because when you do that, your costs go up exponentially because there are taxes and benefits tied on a percentage basis to that overtime, which is now double time and a half. So I think that's an area where I'd like to see a little focus. I mean, clearly there's departments that necessitate overtime, and I think we could all agree that there's essential departments that you can't close down if somebody calls in sick, and that's the chief's department. But if somebody calls in sick in the tree trimming crew, we can just trim that tree tomorrow or next week. I mean, so I think it bears looking at that area, and there might be some savings and some things that we could do there a little bit more creatively.
To say zero overtime is, it's very unrealistic. I mean, we're legally required to pay for it, and we got to pay for emergencies. We got to, yeah. And the park is open every year, every day of the year except 2. Just FYI. And they do a fantastic job.
And to pipe in, I've obviously identified that in my own review of the budget. And several weeks ago, I issued an email that said no more overtime without my direct written approval. The problem I run into, it was in the budget, the current year budget. So that's why going forward, as I meet with the department heads, we're going to have one of the big discussions going to be overtime and about scheduling, for example. There's ways of doing it by schedule where you don't have, as Larry was saying, where you can schedule it such that you don't have to have overtime, but you cover it different ways. And so I make that commitment to the village and to our council that overtime is a huge issue for me personally, and anything I can do to keep it down, we're going to do, because it's not just what you're paying, it's also the benefits associated with that. And so that it's really drastically increasing our personnel costs. And once again, with collective bargaining, it's a little different with fire rescue because they have certain standards where you have to have a certain number of people on each truck, et cetera, where we're locked in. Other areas with public works and the parks, et cetera, there may be some flexibility. So we're going to be looking at any way we can to reduce overtime because that is a big sticking point with me.
You know, I would just go back. I mean, the deeper we get into these details and we talk about how these expense categories overlap and we talk about the value of our employees. And I mean, I want to circle back to this group to maybe ask the question is ultimately, are we saying, hey, Ron, go find, cut out or, balance it so that we don't have to raise taxes. I mean, I don't know if this group can really have this conversation effectively. Ultimately, we're not the final decision makers, but I think what we're kind of getting at is some of these issues are alarming. Like overtime, I think for anybody who's ever been employed or been an employer is just nails on a chalkboard. The insurance is pretty astounding, but yes, we love our employees. So I think it's a complicated question, and I don't know if we can balance the scales here tonight, but I don't even know if it makes anybody feel good to say, okay, and here's another place that is kind of crazy. I'm not sure if it's helping you, Ron, or staff feel good about their positions, but and I value the conversation, but I wonder if what we need to maybe shift the conversation to, we don't want to pay any more taxes. Go, Ron, and figure it out with your people and come back and tell the council how you're going to do that. I mean, is there some value there? Because this is a puzzle that is deep. And so I wonder if maybe we shift our conversation a little bit. Though I'd love to hear from
And let me
Fire.
point out once again that starting next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the village council is having mandated budget hearings, public workshops, basically. And you're all are welcome to attend as citizens, not necessarily as the task force, as well as anybody in the audience are watching. We are, by the way, televising this on our website, so we have a lot more people watching. But that's certainly part of the process. I want to have the proposed budget ready by this week to take to the council with the full knowledge that we're looking for ways to reduce that number. But you have to start somewhere. And so we're starting with the $3 million budget, which is already going to be tight. And we're going to say to them, okay, here's the different scenarios. Councilwoman Gillis asked me today about the presentation of having different proposals, like here it is with a COLA, here's without a COLA, the impact on our employees, because that's a balancing act, because we do have a great staff, we want to keep them, but as you said, cost of living here is very difficult, and you have to balance benefits with salaries and what we can do to keep them. We want to keep our staff, and we have great staff, and once again, if we can factor out the overtime, which is really a big deal, if we can look at other cost savings in other areas, if we can delay some expenditures, we're looking at all that, because I'm probably the most anti-property tax person in the room here, based on my legislative background. I sponsored Save Our Homes, to cap homestead, because I knew that was a problem. So you're looking at someone that hates property taxes and will do whatever I can do. But once again, realize that property taxes is not the entire budget. So when you see an increase in a budget, I look at specifically the increase in property taxes, which, although there has been increases, hasn't been as big as the budget increase. Because when you factor in the budget, we've been pretty successful in getting grants, for example. Congrats to Peter and others here that have gone out and helped us get grant money. That shows up in a budget number, but not necessarily in your property taxes. We have solid waste fees, we have wastewater fees that maybe are not where they should be, but they're bringing in dollars too. So when you look at our overall budget, understand, although the focus of most people is going to be property taxes, I look at the entire budget and where we can make some cuts. But property tax, and specifically the general fund, is really where I think you're talking about trying to find some savings.
And as I recall from the last budget season, I don't remember the conversation sort of around the idea that we're cutting and we're not going to raise. It was more, there was no conversation really about cutting. The other thing that brings that I think about in this conversation is, we're talking about cutting our budget with no conversation about what else would we like to see in this town? Like, what other things would we like that would cost money? So, we're sort of working on, in this conversation, from this real scarcity mindset without, ever thinking about, is there extra money for other things that we want and need in this town? And I know I mentioned them last time, land acquisition or other purchases, or so. But again, I think that is that I would like to see a change in the way the budget meetings ensue, in that we're talking about policy that accompanies, as in budget policy that accompanies how you're going to meet some of these cuts, right in that conversation about budgets. And I suppose that's your department heads.
And just last regular council meeting, we have approved bringing on a grant consultant, Langdon Associates, for $2,000 a month, which is very cut rate, let's just say. And he's already actively, it doesn't technically start till August 1st, he's already looking for ways we can attract grant money. Because every dollar we get from a grant is one less dollar of property taxes we have to take from the citizens. And so we're definitely looking at ways where we can maybe replace property tax dollars with grant money, because we have certain things we want to get done. Particularly, one of our things is protect our natural resources. But certainly a high priority for me would be anything that protects nearshore water quality, for example, that we're spending money on. If we can get a grant to cover it, let's get that grant, because we want to reduce property taxes. There are certain things we have to pay for with property taxes, but some things can be replaced with grant money, and that's a high priority. The council supports it. They all want us to go out and get more grants, and so that's one way, I guess, that we can look at keeping the property tax burden down. But once again, it's competitive. The other thing we're looking at is what's happened to state and federal governments. Things are changing, and I always want to point out, we don't know what FEMA, for example, is going to happen. Right now, we're in the middle of storm season, and we don't know what's going to happen if a storm actually does hit. And we have to have reserves, for example. And so we're looking at property taxes. I'm not even saying we have to spend it all, but we need to have reserves. And that's the other budget decision we have to make, is how much do you want to get close to that edge there. So I'm just saying, just keep that in mind as we're talking. We have one more presenter, Chief Abel. But when you're looking at things, number one, keeping our staff we have great staff. But number two, where can we reduce costs? And once again, that's why Jamie's here. I think hopefully she's answered most of your questions. We know there's some things you probably need to get to you. And once again, I know some of you have asked some questions we haven't been able to answer because we're in the middle of the budget process. But I commit that by the end of the next week's workshops, we'll answer as many questions as we can. But our first priority was getting this budget done to at least have something to look at. So let's say by the end of the week, I will get you the proposed budget. And don't freak out, it's bad. We know it's bad. We're also going to get you the DOJ report that was requested by the state. I don't think it's going to be anything earth-shattering, but we're following all the process from the state and federal governments as far as what we need to be looking at, because I don't mind oversight. If they want to come in and take a look and audit whatever, I think we can defend our expenses based on this process. I think just the fact that we have 4 of you, and Joe Giovanetta is away, but he's been good about this too. All 5 of you have taken this very seriously and raised very good questions that is helping us in the process, because I'm translating some of your questions to our staff. It's not necessarily my personal opinion to look at benefits, but you raised it, she's answering it. We haven't made any decisions yet, but that's certainly something we're going to have to talk about. So you are providing a benefit because you're out there, each one of you has a circle of friends and associates that are talking to you, probably dozens of people, and having an article in the paper with your pictures probably didn't help as far as you being anonymous anymore. So, I've encouraged citizens to call you directly or talk to you directly. They may not feel comfortable coming to a council meeting or coming to me, but they are more than happy to see you in Publix or Winn-Dixie and bring up all their worries. And so translate those concerns to us and through me to the council, because we want to hear that. And we want them to understand. They think it's very easy. Oh, just come in and cut 10%. Okay, show me where. And you don't want to lose staff? What happens if you cut their benefits? I'm just saying, and if we don't going to give a cost of living increase, can they afford to stay here? Like Stephanie was saying. So these are all complicated budget issues. It's not as easy as it looks, but we certainly, that input is helping the public understand why it's just, let's just go to rollback. Well, here are the consequences. Yeah, and we're willing to look at it. You want to save $50 a year on your property tax bill and lose of the park being open most of the year? We can look at that. I don't think you want it, but certainly that's an option. So I'm kind of going in more detail. I appreciate Jamie standing there. Is there anything else personnel related for HR that you want to go through with Jamie?
No, I think that when you look at overtime in the context of the overall budget, it's kind of budget dust. And I don't think that we need to get too hung up on overtime. When you look at other departments and the big fluctuations in the budget, overtime, I mean, everybody has to manage overtime, right? Anybody who's run a business knows that you got to manage overtime. So we manage overtime, and the last couple of years have been wonky here, right? And so people are doing overtime because there weren't enough people around to do what needed to be done, right? But I think and I'm going to try to move the conversation along, get you off the hook, Jamie. But I mean, like planning and development services, that went up $700,000 in 2 years. Okay, why?
Which one was that? I didn't catch what it was.
Planning and development services? You can go.
I think Larry you have another question? Okay.
When is the current Cigna contract expiring?
It's October 1st. Well, the new plan would be October 1st, so September 30th.
Have we reached September 30th, which is coming up?
I've been working with the broker. We're trying to get our number.
Are we looking at other proposals?
Not currently.
Well, I would strongly encourage the
Too
village
late.
manager
It's too late for this year for us to go out to bid. And one of the reasons why they can't and they have to wait until they get the number from Cigna to go out to bid is because once they go out to bid, we could lose the Cigna contract. So it's a waiting game, and our broker is doing a very good job at negotiating our Cigna contract. I will tell you that there is increases of 20 and 30% in the health insurance arena, and he is trying to keep it to, God help him, at least 10.
But why are we not looking at other policies? Why are we not looking at United? Why are we not looking at other providers to get competitive bids? That doesn't, we should be looking at least 3 other companies to provide these services.
I think maybe, and I may be overstepping my boundary here, but we just got a new village manager. And I think that things are like, okay, everything was going, right? Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. And now Ron is here, and we have a task force. And sure, everything needs to be looked at, But we can't, in hindsight, with all due respect, we can't in hindsight be like, well, why didn't we do this?
One of the reasons is contract negotiations. So,
And it probably would have driven overtime, right?
yeah.
That was, sorry. Some
It's
people
okay.
get my humor.
It's okay. I get it. I mean, we try our best.
But I think honestly, Dr. Dalton, I think that is really part of it, is that like, I think the village is trying to find its sea legs because there has been so much turnover in leadership level that we just keep it going, keep everything else going. And yes, now, right, we'll look at it. We'll look at it for next year. But I think, I mean, if we miss the boat on it for this year, then.
Well, we're locked into the union contract for the next 2 years.
Right. And so knowing that timeline, so for next year's budget task force, God bless them, then we would, have that like evaluation.
And let me clarify, when I asked you all to serve, I asked you not just to look at the current budget, but the budget process. So I think you are asking some good process questions. They may not be able to be resolved immediately, but you have started us looking at different things that may not affect the current budget that we're working on, but going forward. And so when you're talking about competitive bids, et cetera, we want to get the best deals for the village we can. Some of them we're locked into, the collective bargaining we're locked into, for example, so it doesn't worth talking about it now. But certainly these contracts, when they come up for renewal, you're identifying some questions that we're going to ask during the next round of competitive bids, et cetera. So I think the process questions are just as important as the specific questions on the budget. Did you, once again, do you have anything for Jamie?
I do not have anything for Jamie, but I want to agree with you from the standpoint that there has been so much change in leadership that there has not been oversight. And there hasn't been anybody to say, no, we can't afford that. That's our opportunity to help with
Yeah.
that.
Well, and additionally, for the council to bring up these kind of very uncomfortable questions, like, it's not popular, and obviously that's political, and the manager's job is super political. So the manager to go in and say, hey, I know you had this great deal and now we're going to change it, is going to be very difficult. So that is, again, thank you for really driving it home. It's something that needs to be addressed, and if there's community support for that, then the manager can carry that, and so maybe can counsel without being hated more than anyway.
And before we get to the next presenter, we do have a hand raised. I don't know if it's for Jamie particularly, but Mr. Wishmeyer wanted to speak, I guess, on the personnel issue. And once again, while we're waiting, there's a sign-up sheet if you have anybody wants to comment specifically or generically. At the end of the next presentation, we'll open it up for general questions. We have some people online, so Mr. Wishmeyer raised his hand during the personnel part. I'm not sure if that's what he wants to ask about, but go ahead, Joe.
Yes, I do have a question. My main thing is, in 2020 and 2021, our budget was $38.5 million. And last year, it was $60.7 million. Now, you say we don't have that many more employees. Have we decreased our services that much? Have we increased our legal fees that much? Why is there such a difference of $35.8 million to $60.7 million? I wish you could please answer that question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. And once again, that's not really directed at personnel. As I said earlier, it's somewhat misleading to look at increase in the total budget because you have to factor in, for example, grants. When you have stewardship money, when you had FQIC money, we've been pretty successful at getting grants to come into the village. Well, that's part of the budget. But my main concern, I think your main concern, is the growth in property taxes collected. And that is still an issue. But I think it's hard to look at the increase in budget overall and be critical about that, because truthfully, the more successful you are getting grants, the bigger your budget's going to be, assuming you're spending it on things we want, like canal restoration, nearshore water quality, beautification, for example. And so there's some things we're trying to get grants for. If we're successful, guess what will happen? The budget will go up. But it goes up by the money we're bringing in from state and federal governments, which we want our fair share coming back to the Village of Alamorada. Now, where I think the valid criticism will be is how much have we gone up in property taxes? And then even there, you have to remember there's different types of property taxes. As Dr. Dalton mentioned last time about property taxes, if you're homesteaded, you have a different tax impact than non-homesteaded versus commercial property versus rentals. So even when you're looking at property taxes, it affects different people differently depending on how their property is classified. So that makes it very complicated. In the end, when I present to council, we're going to talk about the impact on a medium home. If you did X mills, and what you're going to find is, truthfully, the homesteaded people are not going to be paying a lot more in property taxes. The problem is we have commercial property owners like Councilman Gillis, who doesn't have those protections. Those property taxes on commercial property may go up by a lot. So that's what we're trying to balance is we pay what we need to pay out of general revenue, but understand that there are some people that are not protected by Save Our Homes that may see a bigger increase. And that's what we're trying to figure out is how can we keep the property tax increase to a minimum? It's going to go up, because if nothing else, just the value of property has gone up, but so have our expenses. And so that's why the next presenter is going to be talking about a big part of our budget, and that's fire rescue, where we don't have a lot of flexibility. And if there's no other questions going forward, I'd like to introduce Chief Terry Abel, who is in the back, is going to come up here and answer your questions, because we do have a big part of our budget for fire rescue. Yes, Stephanie.
I have one comment, Terry. While you approach, I will be happy to say it. I think to your point, Ron, I think one way for us to kind of also think about the village is what percentage are we a village of businesses versus a village of residents? And where do our taxes play in to those different, between commercial, I mean, you've got commercial, you've got residents, you've got non-residents, but we have a lot of businesses here in the village. We probably have maybe more businesses than we have full-time residents. But it's a question to ask, and it's something to consider with regard to the budget.
And I think once we get through this budget process, we have to have a budget approved by the council by early September. So we're kind of a tight time frame. But some of the questions you all have asked, some of the issues you've raised, are things that we can, going forward, get answers to. It's not going to really help us this budget cycle, but I think it is good to get that information out to the public. You know, one thing I've been shocked about, for example, not just in Alamorada, but countywide, is the low percentage of people that are actually homesteaded people. You know, when I grew up, I was born and raised in the Keys. When I grew up down here, almost everybody I knew that had a home were homesteaded. They lived here, they grew up here. Now, 70, 80% in some areas are not homesteaded. They're second homes or vacation rentals, et cetera. So we've seen a big shift in the Keys away from homesteads, which has affected the budget process and also the services you have to provide, et cetera. And so going forward, those are good issues to look at. But for now, I have to be focused on getting a budget out by end of this week and then have it approved by our village council. Once again, a majority of whom are here tonight or watching. So they're hearing everything you're hearing. And they're telling me, find every way you can to reduce the burden on property taxes. And we take it seriously, but once again, we have here the chief of fire rescue and emergency services, by the way. He also, when we have a storm, a hurricane, he's the guy in charge. So the other thing to look at is not just the cost of fire rescue, and I wanted to explain a little bit about the collective bargaining agreement, about what we are kind of non-discretionary locked into, but also what happened last time. We've heard praise, I think, from Stephanie last meeting about how quickly the village of Alamorada recovered from Hurricane Irma. And I drove up and down the Keys. I was doing the news at the time, and you could distinctly see what was village of Alamorada versus the rest of the county and the cleanup that we did in the village compared to the rest of the county, due in large part to our emergency management people here. They got out there and did a good job, our contractors, et cetera. So we want to maintain that level of service to our community because, going back to your businesses, the sooner we clean up after a storm, the sooner your businesses can get back to making money. And so that's one thing to keep in mind with this budget process is it's not just funding the budget, it's also how much you want to keep in hurricane reserves, because that helped a lot last time. We were able to get out there and spend money, because remember, you don't get it up front. You spend it and get reimbursed. And that was back when the good times of FEMA, and we don't know what's going to happen now. So just keep that in mind as we're talking to Terry tonight. I wanted to touch on fire rescue because that is a big part of our budget. But if you have any question about emergency management, that's the probe. So with that, I'll introduce our chief, Terry Abel.
Good evening, Terry Abel, first time, long time. Glad somebody got that.
Don't take it personally.
I gotta leave, sir. It's nothing
What?
personal. I'm gonna listen to you on Zoom.
Got you.
So while we're waiting, once again, I'd like to maybe just have Terry give a brief presentation, and just like we did before, answer questions, and then after you're done with talking with Terry, open up the public. I think Mr. Fernandez is here, who's got some HR experience. We have some other people in the room that may want to talk. Ms. Culverson's here, who's an expert on almost everything I know about. She's definitely one of my advisors as far as things to go. So there's some people in the audience that may want to speak too. So I wanted to first have Terry speak, answer questions, and then once again move to the audience and get any input from them. So, Chief?
Nope, didn't bring anything prepared. I read all of your reviews, some valid comments in there. Obviously, there's a reason why we got to where we're at. I believe I've spoken to everybody but Steph about why the budget is where it's at. So I'm here. If you got questions, please throw them at me.
Okay, I'm going to go first because
Go
I
ahead.
made that comment about overtime being budget dust, and then I was just looking at this and I'm like, whoa, except for fire, right?
Not budget dust.
No, I know. So in 2 years, Terry, the budget has gone from 5.5 to 7.1. It's huge. And overtime was budgeted for this year at $755,000. And other salaries increase was budgeted at $552,000. And I think, like, I certainly do not want to take away our fire and safety services, right? I'm not here to be an auditor. I'm just saying, like,
You won't.
whoa,
Both
those are
of the-
really big numbers.
Both of those were made in error. Both of those were brought to previous people that were employed here's attention, and I was told to stay in my lane. So the 750, the realistic number is closer to 550. So there's a $200,000 gap in that doesn't need to be there. Larry caught that as well. Thank you, sir. The other one was at 550, I believe, in 2000, something of that nature. It should have been ballpark about 55,000. So again, $500,000 error there. It was called out prior to last year to two people that are no longer with us, and I was, like I said, told to stay in my lane, so kept my mouth shut. Guess what? I'm not going to be over budget this year.
I'm going to pull you out of your lane. That's still an awful lot of overtime.
It is. So to explain my overtime, I'm not to steal Jamie's thunder because this is her jam, but it's my department as well. Understand that our department, in order to be the best in the Keys, because we are, I have amazing people, and the reason we're amazing is because pride and ownership in our community, but it's also because we train. Last year alone, we did just shy, a couple hundred hours shy of 10,000 hours worth of training for our staff. That comes at a cost. That comes at, sometimes I can do it in-house. We try to do it in-house so that I don't have to pay for travel, but sometimes it doesn't. So these people are going as far out as Texas. Sometimes they go to the National Fire Academy up in Maryland. Oftentimes it's Orlando I-4 corridor and south. When they leave, I have staffing requirements. I have to maintain minimum staffing so that I can reply to calls. Currently, right now, for example, I am 2 firefighters down and 1 lieutenant down. One's been out on workers' comp for almost 3 months. Me being down a firefighter is unfortunately almost commonplace. Me finding someone to fill it is really difficult. I'm down 2 other positions, but that's not line positions that don't create overtime. So in an effort to save on overtime, my minimum staffing, I try to keep at 12. That's 4 at each station. 4 at Station 19, 4 at 20, 4 at 21. Totally gambling and playing the odds Monday through Friday. Unfortunately, I dropped those staffing levels to 3 at 19 and 4 at the other 2 stations. 20 doesn't really have the option to drop staffing. It's got additional equipment there that if a call drops, it has to roll. I can't roll the needed equipment with only 3 people. Station 21 is our busiest station, so that one stays hopping, so I keep that one staffed at full staffing. So on an average, about 90 days a year, I don't go to full staffing, totally rolling the bones and playing the odds that something bad doesn't happen on that jurisdiction and hoping that they can mitigate the situation until mutual aid shows up from either Station 20 or from Station 18. So I'm aware it's a big number, it is. And I have done everything I can to try to mitigate it. Shy of, I believe one person mentioned it, adding additional staffing as float positions, but then you have to worry about hitting certain thresholds during an average over 6 months because then they're entitled to more benefits and insurance and everything else. And that's a pain in the butt as well. And I would have to have 15 people rolling on call to not create that issue. So
Right, okay.
we're aware. I've run a dozen different scenarios in my head. I've bounced it off managers. I've bounced it off previous HR, current HR. In order to maintain staffing, unfortunately, right now, it kind of is what it is. I'm not going to tell you the number's going to be lower because that would be a lie, and I'm not going to give you an unrealistic budget either. I'm going to give you the numbers that I know is what's going to happen.
And maybe for budgeting purposes, it goes under training instead of overtime.
We could try to track that for next year. If somebody's out for training or if it's out for workers' comp, we could start maybe trying to break out that.
Training
Don't-
has value.
Don't
right?
worry, Jamie, I'll have Debbie do it, not you and Lindsay. But we can track the days.
Right, but we want our people being trained, so that's
No,
like, oh,
absolutely.
okay, I'm okay with that line item, but if it's like, oh, overtime, well, why?
Right.
So just something to consider.
No,
Look,
absolutely.
my family and I are big fans of fire department and what you have done for my family, so I'm not looking, again, I said yes to being on this task force, so you guys are getting my questions.
No, ask away, please.
I'm good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So Terry, I've got a few questions, and please don't take this personally. This is about budget.
No worries.
So the National Fire Protection Association, and for everybody in the audience, it's an organization that sets standards and codes for the fire safety and emergency services, guidelines for firefighter staffing, and fire station placement. Recommends one station per 10,000 residents. We have 7,000 residents, and we have 3 fire stations. The staffing is recommended per station at 12 to 15. You're managing 12. But it seems as though, looking strictly at population and looking at a national organization that sets these standards, we have too many fire stations and 30 too many employees. So I'm wondering, and we look right down the road, we look at Marathon, they have 10,000 residents. They also cover Key Colony, and they have 1 fire station.
That's
So-
not correct.
Okay, how many do they have?
They have 2 and they're building a 3rd.
Okay, I was unaware of that.
all
Thank
good.
you. So it seems to me, in just looking at the numbers and looking at the recommendations, that we are way overstaffed, and particularly when we look at the number of calls. And this is important, and you and I talked about this. There's 1,800 calls per year, about, which means 600 per station per year. Well, divide that by 365, that's about 1.6 calls per station per day. That seems really low. And when I've talked to firefighters in different municipalities throughout the state, they tell me that their stations average somewhere between 12 and 20 calls per day. Again, this leads me to think that we have too much manpower for the services we require. What is your response to these comments?
So 1501 is the NFPA standard you're referencing. That's on staffing. It varies between combination or paid departments or volunteer departments. The minimum staffing of 12 is absolutely bare minimum. That's line guys. Keep in mind, we would love to have more, but we augment with myself, my assistant chief, my training logistics, and fire inspector. We're all cross-trained. Everybody in our department is firefighter, EMT, firefighter, paramedic, or better. Okay, so we use our 40-hour during the week staff to create that number, so when an incident does drop, we actually do get 15 there. Understand that the 12, my line guys, work 24/48, so that 12 is actually 36 employees. Add my office staff and my 40-hour positions, that's where the 40 positions come from. So we're at minimum staffing. We're actually below minimum staffing. As far as your spacing goes, let's look at another national standard, which is ISO, Insurance Services Organization. The reason we have 3 stations is because of spacing. They don't recognize the insurance services rating scoring, which covers your fire insurance for commercial and for residential, goes on spacing between firehouses. So if you're more than 5 miles between stations, more than 7 for a ladder truck, they don't count you, and you get a rating as, even though fire rescue is, you're paying taxes in the village, if I didn't have Lower Mat Station, you would be counted as you have no fire station to protect you if you're larger than that 5-mile district circumference from 81850, which is our center station. So we have that to help with fire insurance ratings. We also have it because our logistics, just because of the demographics, we run any call, we've got to go to the 91 to drop our patient off and then come back. So we space our stations out so that logistically we're able to respond to any call in a quick fashion. So we have 3, both by ISO design, so that we save on that insurance. We have 3 because the people of Lower Mat asked for a station, so we're going to give them what they asked for. It lowers their insurance. It increases their response time. And yes, you're right, 1.65 calls a day is not much unless you're that one.
That's absolutely,
And
that's
it's
absolutely
seasonal.
correct, Terry. And we
Yes, absolutely.
No, clearly appreciate the service. I'm just wondering, how much is the savings on the fire insurance versus how much we're paying at an $8 million plus budget? There's a trade-off somewhere. And I don't know the answer. I have no idea. But it's something that I think, again, I bring this up for a matter of discussion and thought. So I think it's something that needs to be looked into.
Absolutely. So insurance services is one group that does it. Some insurance companies actually take the number of fires and then they divide it by the amount of loss. Obviously, if we can get to the fire sooner, fires grow exponentially. Now, especially with everything that's in every home is made out of something petroleum-based initially, so they grow quicker. But as far as what that savings would be, I would have to default to Joe because he does it every day for the last 30 years of his life. So if you could help me with that, brother, that'd be amazing.
I thought I was off the clock.
No, sir. Like me,
anything.
never.
Well, I can tell you, you're right with regards to the ISO rating and the 5-mile distance. And if you're not within 5 miles of a respondent fire department, your protection class rating goes up substantially, probably to a 9 or a 10, which would translate into probably 5 times what your fire costs are in your insurance policy. So, I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, and I do remember coming into the business many, many moons ago, and you know, back then in Lower Mat, people were paying some significant money for fire insurance, not wind, just fire. And when they put the substation down there and came to the position where they're within 5 miles of respondent fire department, there was some definite change in premiums down there. Now, how many people that affected and what's the dollars and cents on an aggregate scale, I wouldn't know, but on an individual scale, I'd be very confident saying to you 4 to 5 times what you're paying for fire. So if you had a $1,000 fire policy, it's now $4,000. So, I mean, that would be, you know, a significant number, I would think.
And as Chief Abel said, if you're that one person, you prevent somebody from dying in a house fire because you got there quicker than you might have otherwise. I don't think the people out there watching would say it's worth sacrificing a life to save a few dollars in the budget. So that's something to keep in mind is we have to make sure we're protecting the citizens adequately. Costs are important, but so is protecting life, health, and safety. Did you have something? Before you go, just briefly give us a short synopsis of the collective bargaining agreement, where we have flexibility, where we don't, because I keep getting asked that question of why don't you do X, Y, Z? And I tell them, before my time, it was entered into. But tell us kind of what that governs and what flexibility the village does and does not have in making budget decisions.
So again, as Jamie stated, for 2 years, most of what is depicted out as far as pay rates is absolutely spelled out. Length of service, incentives, stipends, stuff of that nature, spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement. Their insurance for the next 2 years, even if we change it, it's spelled out in their CBA, so it remains the same for those 38, 39 individuals. Training is spelled out, what they're entitled to, what they're not, stuff of that nature. So it goes way more in depth. There's 39 different articles that touch on holiday pay, vacation, sick, travel, pretty much any aspect. If it's not specifically spelled out there, then it defaults to village policy, but they put their fingers in a lot of everything. Got any questions specific I can answer, but to throw 39 articles at you off the hip, off the cuff is a little bit much.
I would just add one thing that you didn't say was there's a bridge in between, one of your fire departments. So, I mean, that's a complicating factor as well.
Correct.
Snake Creek being there. Well, one that goes up, that's a problem.
Which, going back to like Ron said, dealing with emergency management, that we train with the Coast Guard. So if that happens, which it has happened, where the bridge has been stuck up and we've had a med call south, we couldn't get an airframe to fly them, nor did they meet criteria to fly. So it was meet at one marina on one side, load onto a Coast Guard cutter, bring another truck in, load the patient, and then keep on going. So 2 trucks, 2 stations down for 1 patient, but it's an odd situation. But we've trained for it, so we're able to mitigate.
I think this was one of my comments also that, and I made this in my remarks, I think it's important for us to do what we're doing right now, specifically with Chief Abel's department, because it is different than any other department that exists in the village. And I think that by compartmentalizing these conversations, breaking them down into smaller bites, really talking about what drives his costs, what is behind the numbers. I think the average person, when we're looking at this budget and we look at this number and we go, holy moly, that's a big number. I think it's important to have you stand there and say, why is that number that way? And in the course of that conversation, is there a variable that can affect that number that's not going to affect service? It's not going to affect safety. I think that's the important factor, and I do believe that by doing it this way, it allows everybody just to understand a little bit more, because it's easy to pick on you when you're just looking at a big number. It's harder to pick on you when you stand up there and say, what happens if this guy's out? He's at training. What do I do? If I don't put a butt in that seat, it could be somebody's life.
Right.
It's a little bit different than trimming trees. So, the trees could wait a week. You can't wait to put somebody on that ambulance when somebody makes a call.
Agreed. So some of the bigger differences, to pick on AJ because he's there and he's bigger than me, probably not a smart decision. But AJ works 7 to 3, 7 to 4. His wastewater guys are on call at night. My guys are 24/7, 365. They drive a $35,000 pickup. My engine just cost, you signed the contract for it last year. It's $1 million. I have 3 of them. I have a ladder truck that's $1.5 million. My rescues are $550,000. I'm not driving around in a patrol car like the sheriff's office in a $40,000 police car. They're $1 million. They have 1 station, we have 3. So yes, there's built-in costs for our apparatus. There's built-in cost for staffing. Obviously, the fact that we have 3 stations, Larry, you brought that up. The trucks are hugely expensive. Staffing is not cheap, and it's 24/7, 365. We don't close like Maria does for 2 days out of the year. I'm jealous, Maria. I'm going to try that next year, just saying. I'm going to let you know what the cost savings is on that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be joshing, I shouldn't be kidding. But yes, there's huge differences. So compared me to building department, planning department, public works, wastewater, yeah, I am expensive. But if you compare me to other departments doing the same, I'm not that expensive. I'm very reasonable, especially for where we are and what we have to do it with, so.
How can you cut your operational budget, and by how much?
That's a pretty tough one there, Doc, because if you look at my budget, operations only about 17% of my budget. So it's mostly personnel, staffing, and capital.
Right.
Operations side, we start with a zero every year, and we go from zero. We look last year's previous spending, last few years, look at trending. We call our providers. Hey, are you expecting any price increase? If you are, when and how much? So, I mean, we nickel and dime it to make it as close to accurate as possible. So if I'm not within a few thousand on my budget, something catastrophic happened. We either broke something, had to get some crazy repairs, or something bad happened in our community that upset my apple cart and threw my budget off. I literally tried to write it exactly to what it was. Prior to this meeting, Jamie and I'm like, hey, that's too high, drop it. And she's like, well, it's actually something else got rolled into that line item, so that's actually an accurate number. I'm like, okay, thought I could save, some money there. It's just the way they're accounting it differently this year. So I was like, ooh, found some more money. I didn't. She fixed me. She set me straight. So I'm always looking at it. I live 2 miles north. I pay taxes here too. Trust me, I don't want to pay any more.
Anything else? Thanks, Chief. I want to compliment him too. As far as getting grants, I mentioned Peter. This is Mr. Grant person here too. He's gotten a significant amount of dollars in the state budget. Fireboat, for example, it's really needed in our community, and he's been looking for other grants. And so I want to compliment him for really going out there and aggressively looking for grants. And once again, if he gets the grants, the budget goes up. So I don't want to get penalized for bringing in like a new fireboat and go, oh, well, look at the budget went up. Well, it went up because we now have a fireboat that can take care of things out in the water. So thank you for your service as far as that goes too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, we also have a couple people that signed up. Now that those are the three areas I really wanted to focus on. We have other things we can talk about, but since we have some audience members that have been sitting here, signed up so far, we have John Fernandez and Captain Richard Black. If anybody else wants to talk in the community, I think Cheryl wants to talk too, just feel free to come on up and just, we'll start with John. Anything's open now. We've covered the things I wanted to talk about, but have any ideas or suggestions, now's the time. And please introduce yourself and maybe give us a little background.
Okay, my name is John Fernandez. I've been in the village for about 25 years. I retired from the Air Force after 20 years. After that, I started a second career in human resources, both in the public and the private sector, both in industry, healthcare, and just regular businesses like Bass Pro Shops. I was the HR director at the local store here. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to human resources. I also have participated in negotiations for unions with the police union mostly. I was the HR director for the city of North Miami Beach, had 600 employees. I was also the HR director for the Miami Jewish Home and Hospital in Miami that also had about 600 employees. So it's not like I'm talking about little organizations, there were large organizations. A couple of observations. Now, first of all, the reason you have the closed caption is because I asked for it. I'm hard of hearing, and some of you didn't know that. And it's hard sometimes to hear what's going on in here, so I asked them to do that for me, okay? And I appreciate that. And by the way, on television, I was watching it on television, and the voice in the television, at least on the local station that was providing it, was not coming through. All that we had was the closed caption. So I want you to be aware of that, because a lot of people will not have heard what was being said. They could have read it, but not read it. Okay, a couple of thoughts. And I've experienced this. One of the perennial arguments that organizations have is, if we don't take care of our employees as well, they're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else. That's one thing I've heard. The other thing I hear is they're going to find something else that is better. Well, the Keys, we have a different situation. I think working for the government in the village is like the golden goose, okay? You cannot find another organization in the Keys, whether it is the county or whether it is a city, including the village, that employees are not trying to get into. I know some individuals who work for a public center here in the Keys who had no knowledge on what they were going to be hired for, and they were hired. And the reason they left their job is because, in the Keys, is because they found a much better deal in the Keys. And that is a fact. One of the things I would want to know about our staffing is, what has been our turnover rate? Can somebody tell me that?
Unfortunately, I can't right now.
I can't hear you.
I can't right now, but I can get that answer.
But isn't that one of the basic units that you would use to see how many people you've got, how many have left? I used to, in some of the organizations I worked for, when it came to budget time, they say, how many FTEs do you have? By the way, FTEs are full-time equivalents. A full-time equivalent is an individual who works 2,080 hours a year, 2,040 hours a year. That is considered an FTE. Okay? So when a lot of organizations, what they do is they look at how many hours of employment are used, and then divide it by 20 FTE, 2080, and that's how many employees they would have. And that would include part-time and full-time. They just add all those hours together to see how many hours you have used. Okay? And that gives you an idea of what's happening when it comes to staffing. How many people are leaving? And then when you find that you have a reduction in FTEs, you find out why it is that they're leaving. I haven't seen that from the village since I've been here. Now I hear people leaving and I find some people being terminated also, but I have not seen any information that says we have lost so many individuals because they felt they were finding a better job in the Keys. No questions. They'll move up front. They'll move to the mainland to find other jobs. But one of the reasons why they leave is because they don't want to drive back and forth from Miami or from Homestead down here. So they find another job. You find that in teachers also. Teachers don't like to have to drive back and forth, so they'll find another job in the mainland. Okay, so it's turnover. I think somebody should come up with the idea of what is the turnover for the last 12 months, 24 months in the village. Number of employees that have left because they put down in writing, I'm leaving. And by the way, I know you guys do a leaving interview asking why you leave. So put that down. They left because they found a better job somewhere else. Now, there's some individuals that say they found a better job, and maybe that's not the real reason, but I will dig into it more. What is the better job? And then you can get an idea of what we need to do to make it so that they stay. Okay. Almost no organization I've worked for in the last 15, 20 years covers 100% of benefits. Health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance is different. But health insurance and dental insurance, almost in every instance, the employee contributes something. May not be a lot, but something. And when it comes to health insurance, they have a upfront deductible, and there's a reason for that. So people will not abuse it. Because if you know you got to pay $20 to go and see the doctor, you may not be as apt to go for a cold if you are 100% covered. I mean, if you're not 100% covered, because you have to put out $20. Okay? So that's something I think you all should look at. That just doesn't exist anymore. Matter of fact, in most organizations now, big organizations, in their retirement plan, they have changed it So now they don't have a retirement plan run by the organization. They have a retirement plan where the employee can buy into it and put some money aside every month or every payday, and then the organization matches it, okay, to a certain level. Okay, but 100% retirement does not exist anymore, except maybe in the federal government. Okay, contract negotiations. And I have to admit this because I was part of the system. In the city of North Miami Beach, when we had our contract negotiations with the police department and the sewer department and so on, we would run into the negotiations. We would come up with a percentage of increase that employees would get. But the people that were negotiating that contract were employees of the organization. So guess what happened as soon as the contract was signed? Let's say it was at 20% or not 20%, but let's say it was a 5 or 10% increase for the West Department or whatever unit was in. The next thing would happen was management and the non-union employees would say, we want the same thing. So in effect, what was happening was the managers were negotiating and the employees were negotiating for an increase of their salary. So there was no incentive not to give the union people what they wanted because at the end of the day, it came back to the non-union employees. Because the non-union employees, that's the only bargaining that they had. Okay? How much overtime does the village pay? Do we know?
It varies by department, so it varies year by year.
A lot? A little?
A lot.
A lot? Why?
Close to $2 million.
Huh?
Close to $1 million a year.
How many, what does that turn over into terms of hours worked? By whom? That's a lot of money in overtime. Most organizations don't want to pay overtime. I bet you don't pay overtime in your organization. Do you? Do you pay overtime?
But kind of keep it to the task force,
Okay,
because you're getting to some issues that
he's
they're
a
not.
businessman, so that's the reason I'm saying that. On top of that, I called him on the phone. He never returned my call. The EMS question I have.
I didn't realize I was an elected public servant.
Okay.
I'm
Right.
volunteering of my own fruition.
Okay, let me ask you a question when it comes to the fire and EMS. How many calls are as a result of a fire? Only a fire.
About 40 a year.
How many?
40.
3?
4-0. 4-0.
4 or 5, okay. The rest of them are due to, and I may say this, I've had problems where they've had to come to my house to pick me up and bring me to the hospital. So that, I really appreciate that, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is this. Do every individual that works in the fire department have to be fully trained to do all these things? Fire and EMS. EMS, no question. But fire, can we somehow only have X number of individuals that are trained for fire and then everybody else for EMS? I don't know. Maybe it can be done. I don't know. But the question is, do we have to have everyone trained for the maximum situation that can arise?
Absolutely.
Okay. Who said that?
I did.
Okay. Very good. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying, when we send a crew out, we're sending individuals that are training many different things besides just one thing. Okay.
Mr. Fernandez, if we can, we have other speakers, so I certainly welcome your input. If you want to give it to us in writing, we will give it to the committee, our task force, and we'll get it out to the community, but we have a couple more speakers, so if you want to summarize, and we'll have the next
But you
person.
told me when I called you that I could take time because I was afraid I was going to be limited. So I understand what you're saying. The other question I have is outside of human resources. The village attorney, and we have gone through this in other years. We have an outside village attorney that we pay quite a bit of money. Then we hire one because we're spending too much money with a village attorney that we had, and that we were paying for a company. So we hired a village attorney, and then there was a big controversy, and he left. He left or he left under some conditions. Have we looked at the possibility of maybe going back to the question of, are we being effective and efficient in having a in-house village attorney versus a company?
We had a long discussion like this before you got here, so we've already covered that area, and we'll definitely get back to you. But once again, we need to go ahead and move on to the next
Okay.
speaker. I'll be happy to talk to you and get any written information that you have, but we do have a couple more speakers. So,
I'm just raising these questions.
yeah,
as
we
an
appreciate your
employee,
input.
You know, and you can look it up, don't look it up, whatever, but I think there's some things here that might be worthwhile to look into it, because there might be some savings involved, and it costs a loss in not efficiency, but being less expenses in some of the things we do. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. We next have Captain Richard Black, and then following Richard, we have Cheryl Culberson. Anybody else want to speak that's not signed up? Yeah. You want to? Yeah.
Richard Black, Village of Islamorada. I'm self-employed here, so my benefits come from me. So that whole thing about benefits, I'm happy to see that you guys have brought that up and looking into it, and look forward to seeing where we go with that. A couple questions or thoughts I had. Has there ever been in the last few years a workload analysis done on village employees, as far as the time that they put in and what they're actually getting done?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I think that's something that really needs to be done. I think you actually said it as a quote. The village just has this mentality of just keep it going, and we've been keeping it going for a very long time. And I don't think there's been any checks and balances to actually see what their job, it could be in any department, and what they're accomplishing. That being said, management needs to establish some strict goals with checkpoints along the way, maybe to measure the results of accomplishments and these terms being on time. If work is effective and employees have time left over, then maybe we need to merge some positions to lower staff. The other thing, contract work. Most businesses contract things out. Maybe put out to bid a cost savings analysis by, landscaping. We own a lot of trucks. We have a lot of employees that have to operate those trucks. What does that cost versus actually paying another company to do that for us? So that's all I have. Thanks.
And to address a couple of those things, we are looking at each position as far as workload and whether we can maybe cross-train and have them do more. With the limited staff, we don't want to hire more people. In fact, I eliminated all the vacant positions since they haven't been filled the last few months. I figured they can keep going without them. We're not hiring any more people at this point. We have a hiring freeze. So workloads we are looking at and making sure everybody's operating at peak efficiency. As far as the contracting goes, as you all know, we already do contract out quite a bit, and we evaluate each contract to say, is it saving us money? Because, for example, our building department, rather than hiring more building officials, we actually hire out a contractor, but we've determined is cheaper because you don't pay the contractor benefits, for example. And so we do each one is a cost-benefit analysis to make sure that every contract we have is cost-effective. Now, some of them I obviously inherited, so I'm not saying I've done them all, but going forward, I will say that we're going to make sure we're looking at some things now that we maybe want to contract out for, and we'll talk. Our planning director, for example, is looking at some things. She wants to speak next, and Jennifer, you're up after this. So next, we'll recognize our noted attorney in town here, Ms. Cheryl Culberson.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Again, thank all of you for taking the time, a personal time, to do this. It's important. I echo what Richard says about doing a work analysis. That's something that can be done. I know you haven't had time to do that, but it's something that we all have to do in our own offices every day. How's the best, most effective way to manage time? It's a time management issue. But I do want to get back to what you were saying when you were attempting to go through benefits are what keep people here. you don't necessarily need it, but it's something that you have to get to in the proper time. And the analysis is that this is bid time for doing what you're going to do next year. I come from the corporate world. I spent 30 years at Delta Airlines. I know what it took us to get to things that had to be offered in July so that we could do them in October so they could come out the following year. I'm sure all of you have all been in the corporate world and dealt with it too. So you're just going to have to wait. Now that we know our goal and we can keep a village manager more than 45 minutes, it's good to have some place and get some direction. We have a goal that goes there. But I'm going to, before I do anything else, I'm going to put a special thanks out to our fire department. In the 4 years my husband was ill and the last year we were here, they were in my house 14 times to deal with my husband. They were outstanding. It took 4 to 5 of them to get him up or out of the house depending on the emergency. There was never a question. They were in my house 2 minutes after a phone call, and I'm sure that's the way it goes in Lower Mat. I used to live in Lower Matacumbe. If we saw somebody, it was 35 minutes later. And if you've ever been in a wreck on the Fills, when there's a wreck up at the beginning of the bridge and there's no fire truck down there, you're having to wait for a marathon to get you. So that's why you want 3 fire stations. We have something that other places don't have. It's called 5 bridges. You need to be able to get to that thing, and just exactly what you're saying about 5 miles may be too much. You need to be able to have somebody come to you. And Terry, thank you for everybody in your department. But I will say this, as far as what it takes to run the fire department the way it is, the amount of stations we have, the amount of effort we have, whatever it costs, it's priceless. Because if you're the one with the heart attack and you're waiting on somebody to get there, you don't care what it costs. And if it's your family member, you, by God, don't care what it costs. I wish all of you could come in here and participate. We have people that work very hard. Mr. Saunders is attempting to do everything he can to make sure it's a cohesive work for everybody. There are ways that we can save money. But we also have something else a lot of other people don't have, and that's a lot of prima donna members of our population. So we also need to have some kindness put back into people when they approach people in the village. I've been there when the phone calls came in and somebody wanted 40 or 50 pages of public record information, or 400 or 500 pages of public record information. That takes time from your staff to do things they could be doing for other ways. Yes, it's a public record, but that comes from other people thinking that everybody else has to do something for them. So you need to look at the time, and this goes back to time analysis of how much time is staff spending doing things for members of the community that were not necessarily germane to the subject at hand. And you can look at that. But I want to thank those people that have worked here. I want to thank the fire department and all the employees of this community for doing what they do.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jennifer, did you want to speak? Once again, if anybody else in the audience wants to speak, we have several council people still here. We still have our Vice Mayor, Don Horton, Councilperson Deb Gillis, Councilperson Anna Richards. Steve Freeman was on by Zoom, and the mayor's, I guess, still at a committee meeting at the Village Hall, so they are participating. If anybody wants to speak or send a message to them, this is the time. Jennifer, introduce yourself.
I will, yeah. Thank you. I think most of you know me. For those who don't, I'm Jennifer DeBobrian. I'm the planning director for the village. I've been here almost 3 years now. Before that, I worked in municipal government. It's going on, I guess, 28 years now. I just have a couple things I just want to address. First, to Ms. Scuderi's question about the planning development services budget being increased dramatically. Part of that was due to the comprehensive plan update project that we're working on right now. That was a significant increase in the planning development services budget. There was also a council-directed position that was added to the planning development services budget. And then there was a position that was kept in the planning development services budget at the council's direction. So many of those increases were not related to me specifically or my department, but were at the direction of the council. So I just want to clarify that. Secondly, I wanted to speak a little bit about Dr. Dalton's questions about the benefits and staffing issues. Working in municipal government for 28 years, I've never worked in a place where your benefits did not include medical, dental, and vision, and a life insurance policy. To me, that's standard in municipal government. Not necessarily saying that it's free of charge for the employee, but it's included as part of your benefit package. So to say that that's a Cadillac package, I think is disingenuous a little bit. But I also think that as somebody who has a chronic illness myself, our plan is not the greatest plan. Just because it's covered by the village, I still have to pay for lab work, I still have to pay co-pays, I still have to pay, my husband had a heart attack last year and I have a $9,000 hospital bill that I have to pay. So there are still things that I have to pay for that plan. So yes, the village pays my premium as an employee only, or when I had the family plan, they paid part of it. But I still pay quite a bit of money towards my health care. So I just want to be clear about that. Also, you want to know how we can cut 10% of our staffing. I would like to know what services you don't want the Planning and Development Services Department to provide anymore to cut 10% of our staffing. So if you have any suggestions, I'm open. So that's it. Thank you.
Joe, do you have something?
Well, I would just say to Larry's point, I mean, how many other municipalities did you work for that had full dependent coverage?
Everyone.
Every one of them?
Yes.
Okay. Also, the other thing would be, as far as cutting staffing, how would you look at what Richard said with regards to outsourcing? Do you think outsourcing would be any kind of a benefit to us?
For my department, I don't think it would be a benefit, and I can explain why if you'd like. I think that having people who are here every day looking at permits and development orders is more of a benefit to the village than having a consultant who is in Miami who only maybe comes down once a week. I believe the village, before I got here, tried that with a consultant company, and it did not go well. We're still cleaning up errors that they've made. So I think having a staff that does the planning work in-house is critical.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Anybody else from the audience wish to speak? Anybody online?
We have one person online. Mr. Wishmeyer, you're welcome to speak.
Yes, Joe Wishmeyer, Plantation Key. Like I said before, I just don't understand why we went from a budget of 2021 to from 38.5 million to last year at 60.7 million. And like I said before, you keep saying that we don't have many more employees. I would just like somebody to explain to me why we have the big increase. Thank you.
And once again, it's kind of misleading to look at just the budget increases. To give you an example, this year's budget, we're going to have a $9 million expenditure for a culvert project that Peter's doing, but yet but that's mostly funded by grants. But yes, our budget will increase by $9 million, but it's not increasing our property taxes. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. I'm not justifying past increases because there may have been reasons. I'm saying I'm mainly focused on what we can do to control property taxes, because the grants I'm actually actively trying to get here. But those grants will increase our budget if we're successful in getting them. But if it's meeting a need, I'd rather have it paid by grant than by property taxes. So once again, that's where I see the distinction between a budget increase and a property tax increase. Anybody else online?
I think maybe one thing that we could do is look at the amount of grant money that we had back in 2021, to Mr. Wishmeyer's point, and then how much we have now. And then, because even I didn't really realize that the more grant money you get, the bigger your budget gets. So if we could make that actually a pointed part of the conversation about the budget, where you say, hey, this is grant money. And if we take out the grant money, then this is what we're looking at, apples to apples. I think that might be valuable in clarifying.
And also, once again, part of our budget is wastewater, stormwater, et cetera. So those are revenues we're collecting, which as you grow, those numbers are growing too. So there are factors in our budget that are growing, not necessarily in a bad way, because we're adding more units, for example, in the village for affordable housing, for example. Every time you build an affordable housing unit, let's say Habitat, that does increase, the fees we're collecting. So there's a budget increase, but it's meeting a valuable need in our community. So you have to keep in mind budget increases are not necessarily all bad. property tax increases, to me, are mostly bad, and so we're going to do that. And speaking of someone who's going to have some say in that, we do have Councilman Steve Friedman, who has asked to talk. So, Councilman Friedman, go ahead and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation in this process. It's a arduous and difficult situation that we go through every year, and I think that this process has been tremendously helpful. I'm encouraging everyone to show up to the meetings next week and continue to be critical and find ways that we can find that wasteful spending. And I don't think that is really something that we're going to find, because I have confidence in our management and our staff that we're doing everything that we can. So hopefully everybody comes into this with an open mind and understanding that we need to work together on this to benefit the community, and just thank everybody for their participation.
Any questions from the task force or Councilman Friedman? Any input? Thank you, sir. Next up, I believe Councilwoman Deb Gillis would like to speak, and so we welcome her. And to reminder, for people who may have been watching late, there are 3 budget workshops next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They all start at 3 o'clock here in this room here. We certainly welcome public input from task force and the public. And once again, we have Councilman Friedman on the line. We have Deb Gillis here, Anna Richards in the audience, Vice Mayor Don Horton, and then Mayor Mahoney, I guess, is still over at the committee meeting at Village Hall. So they are listening to you, and we appreciate their input too. So, Councilwoman Gillis.
I also would like to express my gratitude for you sitting. I was asked at one point, why did you pick me? Because I knew you guys would do the job. Because we need the input, we need the assistance to get this right. You will make a difference in what we do. You may not see it direct, but you will make a difference. The real reason I got up here is just to put a slight spin on that insurance comment that was made earlier about it went up 58%. I was just going to give you a personal experience in business. One of my properties, technically I have 2. One of my properties related to hurricane insurance went from $58,000, the next year it was $72,000, and the next year it was $96,000 for the same insurance. So that was no fault of my own. It was nothing I could do about that. It's just what was happening in the industry. Okay? So there are reasons why things happen. There's also another scenario I can tell you, that my liability just went up $9,000 this year, 1 year. Now, all of those are part of my cost of running my business. I understand that. But I'm not saying that the rate increase that the village got or took should not have happened. I'm just saying that there are things. I also know that the county recently hired a risk management person that could possibly assist us in the future of getting some better rates. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Councilperson Gillis? Thank you, ma'am. Last call for anybody in the audience. We do have several staff directors here, our Parks and Rec, our environmental consultant, our Public Works, our clerk is here, our building department person is here. So I want to thank all the staff directors for spending time after hours and being here. Obviously, our council people that are here in the audience, and you guys too. So
can I say something really quickly?
We wanted to end it by 8 o'clock, so we'll end it with Stephanie, our public relations PIO.
I just wanted to, as I've been helping the finance team with our budget, I just wanted to point something out that I think might answer Mr. Wishmeyer's question. Our budget has gone up. We were at $58 million in fiscal year 1920. Last year we were at $88 million. However, that's the total budget. However, the percentage of ad valorem taxes as part of that total budget has hovered around 19%. So that large jump in total budget is because of all these other factors, these grants, these building permits, all of these other things, other taxes that are not ad valorem taxes. that contribute to our total budget that are not necessarily ad valorem specifically. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I hope that answered your question, Mr. Wishmeyer.
Once again, I want to thank the task force. You've done a great job. We'll probably have another hearing or meeting after the next week's budget hearings. We have to focus on the council, and they're going to get input from you guys and others. But next week is going to be devoted to the council. But after that, they still have to vote on the budget in September. I'll probably want to schedule another meeting with you guys where I can actually give you the budget they'll be considering and get your input. So they want to hear it from you too. And once again, thank our staff for showing up tonight. And we're ending it before 8 o'clock, which is always a successful meeting here in this headquarters. So the meeting of the task force is now adjourned. Thank you very much.